My boss fired me after 20 years, but I knew it already. They never expected what was coming. The first time I noticed something was wrong was on a Tuesday morning in April. I remember it clearly because it was the day of our quarterly review, a meeting I had led for the past 15 years. But that morning, my calendar remained empty. No invitation. No agenda to prepare. Nothing. I told myself it was just an oversight. After 20 years at Meridian Enterprises, I had survived 5 CEOs, 3 company restructurings, and countless strategic pivots. Olivia Smith, Senior Operations Director, that was me. The steady hand, the institutional memory, the one who knew where all the bodies were buried, figuratively speaking. At least, that's what I thought. Hey, isn't the quarterly today? I asked Lisa, my assistant of 7 years, trying to sound casual. She looked up from her computer, her expression momentarily frozen before shifting into something carefully neutral. Oh, they moved it to the executive conference room. I thought you knew. No invitation, I said, holding up my phone with my calendar displayed. That's strange, she said, but she did meet my eyes. I'll check on it. She never got back to me. And I never asked again, because by then I already knew. Later that day, I walked past the executive conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see them all there. Marcus Reynolds, the CEO, Sarah Chen, the CFO, Brian Donovan, the COO, and even Jordan Phillips, my direct report who had only been with the company for 3 years. They were laughing, pointing at slides, making decisions. Decisions without me. I stood there for a moment, watching. 20 years of my life given to this company, and now I was on the outside looking in. The worst part? None of them even noticed me standing there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying moments from the past few months in my head. The way conversations would suddenly stop when I walked into the break room. How Marcus had been too busy to have our usual monthly lunch for 3 months running. The way certain financial reports were no longer copied to me. You're being paranoid, my husband James told me when I finally shared my concerns. You've been there forever. They value you. But I knew better. In the corporate world, forever doesn't exist. Value is measured quarterly, not in years of loyal service. And I was becoming a liability. You see, I knew too much. Over the years, I had seen the company change. What started as occasional ethical corner cutting had evolved into systematic fraud. The offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands that somehow never appeared on the official books. The contracts that were magically awarded to us after certain consulting fees were paid to officials. The safety violations that were buried after workers got hurt. I had looked the other way because that's what you do when you're part of the team. When you have a mortgage, 2 kids in college, and a retirement plan tied to company stock. When speaking up means becoming a target. But now, they were making me a target anyway. The next sign came 2 weeks later. My parking spot, the one with my name on it right next to the executive entrance, had been reassigned to Jordan. My stuff had been moved to a spot in the far corner of the lot, next to the dumpsters. Administrative error, HR told me when I inquired. But their eyes said something different. Then my budget was cut by 30%. My team was redistributed to other departments. My office, the corner one with windows on 2 sides that I had earned after 15 years, was needed for the new Client Experience Center. I was moved to a windowless room next to the server room, where the constant hum of machines made it impossible to think, let alone make phone calls. Still, I persisted. I came in early, stayed late, tried to prove my worth. But my emails went unanswered. My suggestions in meetings were acknowledged with tight smiles and then ignored. My expertise, once the thing that made me indispensable, was now dismissed as old thinking. They were pushing me out, slowly but surely. Death by 1,000 cuts. Most people would have quit, found another job, preserved their dignity. But I wasn't most people. And Meridian wasn't just a job to me. It was my life's work. I had built departments from scratch, mentored countless employees who had gone on to great things, and solved problems that had stumped everyone else. So instead of leaving, I started watching, and listening, and most importantly, gathering. Every meeting I took detailed notes. Every questionable directive I saved. Every email that hinted at impropriety, I forwarded to my personal account. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it all yet, but it felt good to have some form of insurance. And then came the rumors of a major reorganization. People were nervous. The last time there had been a reorg, 20% of the staff had been let go. But this time, I wasn't worried about the rank and file. I was watching the executives. Marcus started having closed-door meetings with the board. Sarah was working late, going through financials with a team of analysts I'd never seen before. Brian had stopped bragging about the company's future and started updating his LinkedIn profile.
They were preparing for something big.
And whatever it was, I knew I wouldn't be part of it. The invitation to meet with Marcus came on a Friday afternoon. Monday, 9 a.m. My office. Your future at Meridian. I didn't tell James. Why worry him? Instead, I spent the weekend in my home office, organizing all the information I had gathered over the past few months. Years, actually. Because once I started looking, I realized I had been unconsciously collecting evidence of Meridian's misdeeds for a long time. By Sunday night, I had everything in order. Multiple copies stored in various secure locations. A clear narrative of fraud, corruption, and cover-ups that would make any investigative journalist salivate. A list of contacts at regulatory agencies who would be very interested in what I had found. I slept soundly that night for the first time in months. Monday morning, I dressed carefully in my best suit, the one I reserved for board meetings and important client presentations. I kissed James goodbye, told him I might be late, and drove to the office one last time. Marcus's assistant gave me a pitying look as I passed her desk. "He's waiting for you," she said softly. I nodded, straightened my jacket, and entered the lion's den. Marcus was sitting behind his massive desk, flanked by Sarah and a woman I recognized as the new head of HR. He didn't stand to greet me. "Olivia," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Have a seat." I sat, feeling strangely calm. I knew what was coming. I had seen it coming for months, but they had no idea what I had coming for them. "I'll get right to the point," Marcus said, not quite meeting my eyes. "As part of our restructuring, we've had to make some difficult decisions." I nodded, waiting for the axe to fall. "Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." I didn't cry when Marcus told me I was fired. I didn't beg.
I didn't ask why.
I simply nodded, took the manila envelope containing my severance package, and stood up to leave. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Sarah asked, seemingly surprised by my calm demeanor. I turned back, searching her face. We had started at Meridian the same year. We'd gone to each other's weddings. She'd sent flowers when my mother died. Now she sat there, complicit in tossing me aside like yesterday's garbage. "What would you like me to say, Sarah?" I asked, my voice steady. "Thank you for the memories?" She flinched.
"Good.
"We'll need you to clear out your office today," the HR woman, Jennifer, her name tag read, interjected. "Security will assist you." "Of course they will," I replied with a thin smile. Heaven forbid I steal a stapler after 20 years of service. Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Olivia, this isn't personal. It's just business." I laughed then, a short, bitter sound. "It's always personal, Marcus. Especially when you know what I know." His eyes narrowed slightly. "And what exactly do you know?" I held his gaze for a long moment. "Everything." I turned and walked out, heart pounding but head held high. The trembling didn't start until I was in the elevator. Not from fear or grief, but from anticipation. The game had finally begun. Security guard Ted, who had wished me good morning for 15 years, now stood awkwardly in my office, watching as I packed my meager belongings. Years of achievements reduced to a single cardboard box. "I'm sorry about this, Miss Smith," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "Not your fault, Ted," I said, placing my company awards in the box. Awards for loyalty, for excellence, for integrity. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I packed, my mind wandered back to when I first discovered Meridian's secrets. It was 5 years ago, during the North Star acquisition. I'd been reviewing the financials when I noticed discrepancies in the numbers, a $3.2 million payment that appeared and disappeared across different versions of the same report. When I'd asked Marcus about it, he'd waved it away. Creative accounting, Olivia. Nothing to worry about. He'd wrapped his arm around my shoulder, his cologne overwhelming. This is how big business works. We need to look stronger on paper to make the acquisition happen. I'd nodded, accepted his explanation. I needed my job. James had just started his own business, and our daughter Emma was starting college. I couldn't risk it all for what seemed like a minor financial sleight of hand. But that was just the beginning. Soon I noticed more creative accounting. The safety incidents at our manufacturing plants that were classified as operator error when it was clearly faulty equipment. The environmental compliance reports that were doctored to avoid fines. Then there was the Davidson contract, a deal worth $50 million. We shouldn't have won it. Our bid wasn't the lowest. But somehow we did. Later, I discovered an offshore payment of $200,000 to a consulting company owned by the brother-in-law of the official overseeing the bidding process. Each time I noticed something, I saved the evidence. Not because I planned to use it, at least not then, but because it made me feel less powerless, less complicit. I became the company's unwitting archivist of corruption. I had emails proving Marcus knew about the toxic waste being dumped near our Phoenix facility. Documents showing how Sarah had manipulated revenue numbers for 11 consecutive quarters. Recordings of board meetings where they joked about exploiting loopholes in labor laws. I had enough to destroy Meridian 10 times over. And now they had given me the perfect reason to use it. As Ted escorted me to my car, carrying my box of belongings, I saw Jordan watching from the lobby. My replacement. My protege. My betrayer. I'd hired him, mentored him, taught him everything I knew, and he'd used it to push me out. "Your parking pass, ma'am," Ted said awkwardly, holding out his hand. I dropped the plastic card into his palm. 20 years, I murmured, and this is how it ends. "If it helps, most of us think it's wrong," Ted said quietly. "You built half this company." I smiled genuinely for the first time that day.
Thank you, Ted.
That does help. I drove home in a daze, the manila envelope on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. Inside was the severance agreement, 6 months' pay in exchange for waiving my right to sue. And, of course, a non-disclosure agreement that would legally prevent me from revealing any of Meridian's secrets. They thought the NDA would protect them. They thought the money would silence me. They thought wrong. James was home when I arrived, surprising me. He'd taken the day off, sensing I'd need him. "How bad was it?" he asked, pulling me into an embrace. "About as expected," I said, breathing in his familiar scent. "I'm officially unemployed after 2 decades. Their loss," he said fiercely. "You can find another job in a heartbeat. Someone will snatch you up." I pulled back, looking at him. My loyal, honest husband who had always believed in playing by the rules. Who'd never dream of the revenge I was already planning. "Actually," I said, "I think I'm going to take some time off. Figure out what I really want." "Whatever you need," he said, brushing hair from my face. "We'll be fine financially for a while." If only he knew what was coming. How our lives were about to change completely. That night, while James slept, I went to my home office and opened my laptop. I navigated to a folder labeled Insurance Policy, a bland name for the most explosive collection of corporate secrets in Meridian's history. It was time to set the plan in motion, but I needed to be smart, calculated. This wasn't about rushing to expose them, it was about dismantling them piece by piece. First, I needed to establish a secure communication channel that couldn't be traced back to me. Then, I needed to organize my evidence for maximum impact. And finally, I needed to decide where to strike first. By dawn, I had my answer. I would start with their pride and joy, the Davidson contract that had made Marcus's career and put Meridian on the map. I smiled as I watched the sun rise. They thought they'd ended my story. They had no idea it was just beginning. The severance package sat untouched on my kitchen counter for 3 days. 6 months' salary in exchange for my silence, and a promise not to sue. A pittance compared to what I knew. "You need to sign it, Olivia," James urged over breakfast. "We could use the money while you job hunt." I took a sip of coffee, studying my husband's worried face. 23 years of marriage, and there were still things he didn't know about me, like how I'd already transferred our savings to a new account, or how I'd consulted with a lawyer who specialized in whistleblower protections. "I'm not signing anything yet," I said firmly. "Once I do, I lose all leverage." James frowned. "Leverage for what?"
Honey, it's over.
Meridian made their decision. "And I've made mine," I replied, standing to clear my plate. "Trust me on this." The truth was, I couldn't tell James everything. Not yet. He was too honest, too straightforward. He'd want me to go through proper channels, file complaints with regulatory agencies, let the system work. He didn't understand that the system was broken, that men like Marcus Reynolds didn't play by the rules. So I lied to the person I loved most in the world. A necessary betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa, my former assistant. "They've already moved Jordan into your office. He's wearing one of your plants." "I'm so sorry, Olivia." I texted back. "Not your fault. Take care of yourself." What I didn't add was, "And maybe update your resume soon." That afternoon, I drove to a small coffee shop 30 miles away, well outside our usual haunts. The kind of place no one from Meridian would ever visit. I'd made the appointment using a new email address created at the library on a public computer. He was waiting for me at a corner table, Michael Reeves, investigative reporter for the Financial Times. Early 40s, rumpled blazer, eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Smith?" he asked as I approached. I nodded, sliding into the seat across from him. "Thank you for meeting me." "Your message was intriguing," he said, studying me. "You claim to have evidence of corporate fraud at Meridian Enterprises?" "I do," I confirmed, "but we need to establish some ground rules first." Michael leaned forward. "You want anonymity." "Complete and total," I agreed. "Nothing can trace back to me. I'll be your source, but never on the record." "That depends on what you have," he said cautiously. "I need to verify everything independently." I smiled, sliding a USB drive across the table. "This contains documents related to the Davidson contract, a $50 million deal that Meridian won 3 years ago. You'll find evidence of a bribe paid to secure it, bank transfers, emails discussing the consulting fee. Everything you need." Michael's eyes widened slightly as he pocketed the drive. "If this checks out." "It will," I assured him. "And there's more where that came from. Much more." "Why now?" he asked, the question I'd been expecting. "Why come forward after all this time?" "Because they fired me," I said simply. "After 20 years of loyal service." "Revenge, then," he noted, not judging, just observing. "Justice," I corrected. "I looked the other way too long. This is me making it right." We spoke for another hour, establishing protocols for future communications. I would be Phoenix in his contacts. We would only communicate through encrypted messaging. I would feed him information gradually, allowing each story to land with maximum impact. As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in years.
The wheels were in motion.
2 days later, I signed the severance agreement. Not because I'd given up, but because I needed Meridian to believe I had. I needed them complacent, unsuspecting. The money would help fund what was coming next. James was relieved. "Now you can move forward," he said, hugging me. "Put Meridian behind you." I hugged him back, whispering, "Yes, I can finally move forward." That night, I received a text from an unknown number. Documentation verified. Story runs Sunday. Thank you, Phoenix. Sunday morning, I was unusually cheerful, making pancakes while James read the paper on his tablet. Suddenly, he looked up sharply. "Olivia," he said slowly, "there's a story here about Meridian. Something about bribing officials for the Davidson contract. Did you know about this?" I kept my expression neutral as I flipped a pancake. "Really? Let me see." I read the article over his shoulder, feigning surprise at revelations I had orchestrated. Michael had done an excellent job. The story was damning, detailed, and had already been picked up by other outlets. This is huge," James said. "The stock is going to tank tomorrow." "Couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of people," I remarked, returning to the stove. James gave me a strange look. You don't seem very surprised. Corporate corruption isn't exactly shocking these days, I deflected. Pass the syrup? Monday brought the chaos I'd anticipated. Meridian stock dropped 12% in the first hour of trading. News outlets were running the story on heavy rotation. My phone lit up with texts from former colleagues, all variations of, "Did you see this?" Then came the call I'd been waiting for. Marcus Reynolds, his number flashing on my screen like a warning. James was in the shower. I stepped onto the back porch and answered. "Hello, Marcus." "Olivia." His voice was tight, controlled rage vibrating beneath the surface. "I think we need to talk." "About what?" I asked innocently. "Don't play dumb," he snapped. "This Davidson contract story. The timing is rather convenient, don't you think? Right after you leave the company." "I signed your NDA, Marcus." I reminded him. "I can't discuss Meridian's business dealings, remember?" "Cut the crap," he growled. "Was it you? Did you leak this?" I let the silence stretch, savoring his discomfort. "You know, I finally said, when you fired me, you said it wasn't personal, just business. Well, whatever's happening to Meridian now, it's not personal either. It's just justice." "You'll regret this," he threatened, "when we find proof." "But you won't," I said calmly. "Good luck weathering the storm, Marcus. I hear it's just beginning." I ended the call and blocked his number, my heart racing with a dark thrill. The first domino had fallen, and Marcus was right to be afraid, because I was just getting started. The Davidson contract exposé was just the opening salvo. I'd planned a systematic dismantling of Meridian Enterprises, a series of precision strikes that would leave them reeling, wondering where the next blow would come from. I hadn't shared my master plan with Michael Reeves. The journalist was useful, but he had his own agenda. He wanted Pulitzer-worthy stories. I wanted justice. Sometimes our interests aligned, but I needed other avenues as well. For my next move, I needed someone inside Meridian. Someone who owed me. Someone who had access, but remained invisible to the executives. Diane Carter had been with the company's IT department for 15 years. I'd saved her job twice, when budget cuts came around. More importantly, I'd helped her son get into rehab when he struggled with addiction, paying for it myself when insurance wouldn't cover it. Some debts can't be repaid with money. We met at a hiking trail outside the city, away from prying eyes and surveillance cameras. "This is risky," Diane said nervously, glancing around the empty parking lot. "They're paranoid after the Davidson story. Security's been increased. They've hired forensic accountants to go through everything." "Good," I replied. "Let them waste resources looking in the wrong places." I handed her a list of server directories. "I need copies of these files. Can you do it without being detected?" She studied the list, her expression changing from concern to surprise. "These are all related to the Cayman accounts. You're going after the offshore money?" "Phase 2, I confirmed. "Can you get them?" Diane hesitated. "They've revoked most access privileges since you left. There are new firewalls." "But not for someone who helps maintain the firewalls," I pointed out.
She sighed.
"I'll need 3 days. And Olivia? If I'm caught, I was never here." "Of course," I agreed. 3 days. While waiting for Diane, I began preparing the groundwork for Phase 3. That one would require more than just information. It would need a partner with specific expertise. Victor Zhang had been Meridian's tax attorney before Marcus pushed him out last year. Victor had objected to some particularly aggressive tax strategies and suddenly found himself redundant. We'd stayed in touch, united by our shared resentment. The Cayman accounts? Victor whistled when I called him. That's where the real dirt is. They've been shifting profits offshore for years to avoid taxes. It's technically legal if structured correctly, but knowing Marcus? He cut corners, I finished. And I'm betting the structure doesn't hold up to scrutiny. If you can get those records, I can analyze them. Find the weak points. There was eagerness in Victor's voice, the prospect of payback fueling his legal mind. 3 days later, Diane delivered. A thumb drive containing gigabytes of financial data, the complete history of Meridian's offshore operations. Victor spent a week poring over the files, occasionally calling me with gleeful updates. "They're idiots," he declared during our final review. "They didn't maintain the corporate veil between entities. There's clear evidence of commingling funds. And get this, they used the accounts to pay for personal expenses. Marcus charged his daughter's wedding to a corporate account. So it's tax fraud." I confirmed. Tax fraud, misappropriation of corporate assets, material misrepresentations to shareholders, Victor listed. Take your pick. We prepared 2 packages. One for Michael Reeves with the cleanest, most journalistically relevant documents, and another, more comprehensive set for the IRS whistleblower program. The timing had to be perfect. I arranged for Michael's story to break on a Monday, the start of a trading week. The IRS filing would happen simultaneously, filed electronically at 9:01 a.m., 1 minute after markets opened. The weekend before, James noticed my tension. "You've been distracted lately," he observed as we worked in the garden. "Is it job hunting stress? You know we're fine financially." I pushed my hands into the soil, planting bulbs that wouldn't bloom until spring. A metaphor for patience I appreciated. "Not exactly," I admitted. "James, there's something I need to tell you." His face clouded with worry. "What is it? Are you sick?" "No, nothing like that." I sat back on my heels. "It's about Meridian. And what's been happening in the news." Understanding dawned on his face. "The Davidson contract story. That was you, wasn't it?" I nodded slowly. "That, and what's coming next." For the next hour, I explained everything. The years of corruption I'd witnessed, the evidence I'd gathered, and my plan for systematic exposure. I left out some details, particularly about Diane's involvement, but gave him the essence. James was quiet for a long time after I finished. "This could backfire," he finally said. "These are powerful people, Olivia." "I know the risks," I assured him, "but I can't let them get away with it." He took my dirt-covered hands in his. "Then we'll face whatever comes together. Just promise me you're being careful." "Always," I promised, relief flooding through me. I hadn't realized how much I needed his support until I had it. Monday arrived. At 9 a.m. sharp, Michael's story went live across multiple platforms. Exclusive: Meridian Enterprises' secret offshore tax scheme exposed. By 9:05, Meridian stock had dropped 8%. By noon, Meridian had issued a weak denial, claiming standard industry practices being misrepresented by disgruntled former employees. By closing bell, the stock had plummeted 27%, wiping out over $1 billion in market value in a single day. I watched it all unfold from my home office, a glass of champagne in hand. James joined me for lunch, bringing sandwiches and a worried expression. "It's just the beginning," I replied, unable to keep the satisfaction from my voice. "Tomorrow, the focus will shift to individual executives, their personal use of corporate funds." My phone buzzed, an encrypted message from Michael. "Board calling emergency meeting tonight. Sources say they're discussing leadership changes." I showed it to James, who shook his head in amazement. "You've actually done it. You're taking down the whole company." "Not the company," I corrected. "Just the people who corrupted it." My phone rang again, an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Is this what you wanted?" Sarah Chen's voice, tight with fury. "People are losing their jobs, Olivia. Their pensions. Their livelihoods." "No, Sarah," I replied calmly. "This is what you created. All of you. I'm just making sure everyone sees it." The line went dead. I looked up to find James watching me, a strange expression on his face. "What?" I asked. "I've never seen this side of you before," he said quietly. "It's a little frightening." I smiled, raising my glass. "It's just justice, dear. And we're still only getting started." The fallout was swift and devastating. By Wednesday, Marcus Reynolds had been temporarily relieved of his duties pending investigation. Sarah Chen resigned the following day, citing personal reasons. The board appointed an interim CEO, Lawrence Wilson, a 70-year-old retired executive known for corporate turnarounds. Meridian stock continued its freefall, losing 40% of its value in 3 days. Class action lawsuits from shareholders were being filed hourly. Former clients were distancing themselves, canceling contracts. The company that had defined my life for 2 decades was imploding. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt strangely hollow. "You don't seem as happy as I expected," James observed that evening as we watched the news coverage. Lawrence Wilson was giving a press conference, promising full cooperation with authorities and return to ethical business practices. "It's just not as satisfying as I thought it would be," I admitted. "What did you expect?" I considered the question. "I'm not sure. Maybe for Marcus to admit what he did? To acknowledge the people he hurt along the way? Instead, he's hiding behind lawyers and PR statements." James squeezed my hand. "People like that never admit they're wrong, Olivia. That's not how they're wired." He was right, of course. But it didn't make the victory any sweeter. Then came the collateral damage I hadn't fully anticipated. Lisa, my former assistant, called in tears. "They're cutting staff by 30%, she sobbed. "Everyone in administrative support. We're all gone by the end of the month." My stomach nodded. "Lisa, I'm so sorry. I never wanted." "Did you do this?" she asked suddenly. "All these exposés, was it you?" I hesitated too long. "I thought so," she said, her voice hardening. "I hope revenge feels good, Olivia. Some of us have kids to feed." She hung up before I could respond. I sat staring at my phone, the first real doubt creeping in. How many innocent people were being hurt by my crusade against a few corrupt executives? James found me in the kitchen later, mechanically chopping vegetables for dinner. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately sensing my mood.
Lisa lost her job, I said.
"So did a lot of other innocent people. Because of me." He leaned against the counter. "No, because of Marcus and his cronies. They're the ones who committed fraud. They're the ones who put the company at risk." "But I pulled the trigger," I argued. "Would you rather the fraud continued?" he challenged. "More people hurt? More rules broken? Sometimes things have to get worse before they can get better." His words helped, but didn't erase my guilt completely. That night, I lay awake wondering if I'd gone too far, if the justice I sought was worth the cost to people who'd done nothing wrong. My phone rang at 11:42 p.m., jolting me from troubled thoughts. Unknown number. James stirred beside me as I slipped out of bed and into the hallway. "Hello." I answered cautiously. "You've ruined everything." Marcus's voice, slurred with what I assumed was alcohol. "Are you happy now?" A chill ran through me. "How did you get this number?" "Does it matter?" He laughed bitterly. "You've taken everything else."
My job.
"My reputation. My retirement. You did that to yourself," I said, moving downstairs where I wouldn't wake James. "Years of fraud and corruption." "Spare me the moral high ground," he spat. "You knew. You always knew. You were complicit." The accusation stung because it held truth. "Yes," I admitted. "I knew and I said nothing. That makes me part of the problem. I'm fixing that now." "By destroying lives?" "They're gutting the company. Thousands of jobs on the line. Was that your goal?" I sank onto the sofa, suddenly tired.
No.
"I just wanted you and the others to face consequences." "Well, congratulations," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Sarah's husband is leaving her. Brian's kid got kicked out of college because they can't pay tuition anymore. We're all facing potential criminal charges." "I'm not responsible for your family problems," I said firmly. "No? What about your precious little people you claim to care about? The rank and file? What happens to them when Meridian goes under?" That hit home. I hadn't considered the possibility of complete collapse. "Lawrence Wilson will turn things around," I said, with more confidence than I felt. Marcus laughed again, a hollow sound. "Wilson is a hatchet man. He'll carve up what's left and sell it for parts. The Meridian you knew is already dead." I closed my eyes, fighting a wave of nausea. "What do you want from me, Marcus?" "I want you to know that this isn't over." His voice turned ice cold, the drunken slur suddenly gone. "You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming for you." "Is that a threat?" I asked. It's a promise. He paused. How's James doing? Still working on that little startup of his? Be a shame if potential investors learned it was funded with proceeds from corporate espionage. I was shocked. You stay away from my family. You didn't stay away from mine, he countered. Actions have consequences, Olivia. Isn't that what this is all about? The line went dead. I sat frozen. Phone clutched in my hand. James found me there an hour later, still wide awake. Who called? He asked, settling beside me. Marcus. I said, my voice hollow. He threatened us. You, specifically. Your business. James paled slightly, but squared his shoulders. He's desperate. Lashing out. What if he's right? What if I've gone too far? The doubt that had been building now burst forth. All those people losing their jobs. Listen to me, James said firmly, taking my hands. You didn't create this situation. Marcus and his team did. They committed fraud. They broke the law. They're the ones who put everyone's livelihoods at risk. But I could have handled it differently, I insisted. Gone to the authorities first, instead of the press. Would that have worked? He asked skeptically. Or would they have buried it, like they've apparently been doing for years? He had a point. I'd seen how Meridian handled whistleblowers. We can't back down now, James continued, surprising me with his determination. If Marcus is threatening us, it means you've hit a nerve. There's more he's afraid you'll expose. I studied my husband's face, seeing a strength I'd always known was there, but rarely had to call upon. There is one more thing, I admitted. The biggest one yet. Then that's what we do next, he said, no hesitation. I leaned against him, drawing comfort from his certainty. When did you become the ruthless one? When they threatened my family, he answered simply. As dawn broke, our path was clear. Marcus had made this personal. Now I would finish what I started. Marcus's threat changed everything. This wasn't just about corporate justice anymore. It was about protecting my family. The final phase of my plan had been on hold. Evidence so damaging I'd hesitated to use it. Not anymore. What exactly is this last piece of evidence? James asked over breakfast the next morning, dark circles under his eyes matching mine. I opened my laptop and turned it towards him. Project Icarus. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the documents. Is this what I think it is? Clinical trial data. I confirmed. For Meridian's flagship drug, Neuroxolin. The miracle treatment for early-stage Alzheimer's that's responsible for 40% of their current revenue. The results are manipulated, James whispered, the horror dawning on his face as he continued reading. They knew it wasn't effective. They knew there were severe side effects they didn't disclose. Worse, I said grimly. I have emails showing Marcus and the board discussing the problems, but deciding to push forward anyway. One of them literally wrote, by the time anyone figures this out, we'll all be retired on our private islands. James looked up, ashen. People have been taking this medication thinking it's helping them. Over 300,000 patients, I confirmed. Paying $4,000 a month for a drug that, at best, does nothing, and at worst, accelerates cognitive decline. This isn't just fraud, James said. This is criminal. People have died because of this. Now you understand why I've been building towards this, I said. The financial fraud was just to weaken them. This is the kill shot. We spent the day preparing. This wasn't something I could release through Michael Reeves or any single journalist. This needed maximum impact, immediately. I'd created an anonymous website months ago, ready for this moment. Every document, every email, every falsified test result, all meticulously organized and explained in plain language that anyone could understand. I'd also prepared packages for the FDA, Department of Justice, and attorneys specializing in pharmaceutical class actions. At midnight, I hit send on scheduled emails to every major news outlet, patient advocacy group, and regulatory body. By morning, the world would know the truth about Neuroxolin. By morning, Meridian Enterprises would cease to exist as we knew it. Are you sure about this? James asked as I closed my laptop. There's no coming back from it. I'm sure, I said, feeling strangely calm. Some lines can't be uncrossed. They crossed this one the moment they decided profits mattered more than patients' lives. We held each other that night, neither sleeping much, waiting for the dawn, and whatever it would bring. The explosion was even bigger than I'd anticipated. I woke to my phone buzzing nonstop with news alerts. Breaking: Meridian Pharmaceuticals accused of falsifying Alzheimer's data. Meridian stock halted after plunging 68% in pre-market trading. By noon, the board had called an emergency meeting. By 2, they'd announced Meridian was filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. By 3, federal agents were seen entering Meridian headquarters with boxes and evidence bags. Marcus Reynolds was arrested at his home, the footage playing on a loop on every news channel, the disgraced CEO in handcuffs, being led to a waiting FBI vehicle. Sarah Chin turned herself in shortly after. 3 other executives were reportedly negotiating surrender terms with prosecutors. I watched it all unfold with a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. Justice was being served, but at a terrible cost. Meridian employed over 5,000 people worldwide. Many would lose jobs, healthcare, retirement savings. The ripple effects would be enormous. Yet the alternative, allowing a dangerous fraud to continue, potentially harming thousands more patients, was unthinkable.
My phone rang.
Michael Reeves. "It was you," he said when I answered. "All of it. From the Davidson contract to this bombshell." "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied carefully. "Don't worry," he chuckled. "I'm not looking to expose you. I need to understand. Why wait until now? Why not reveal the Neuroxolin fraud first?" I considered my answer carefully. Sometimes justice needs to be strategic. If I'd led with Neuroxolin, they would have used their considerable resources to discredit the evidence, bury the story, pay off the right people. I needed to weaken them first, make them vulnerable. "Calculated," he observed, "and effective." "I hope the patients get justice," I said. "That's what matters now." After hanging up, I stepped outside for some air. Our quiet suburban street continued its normal rhythm. Children playing, neighbors walking dogs, mail being delivered. This little corner of the world remained unchanged while elsewhere, an empire was crumbling. James joined me on the porch swing, handing me a cup of tea. "Lawrence Wilson called a press conference," he said. "He's announced a complete restructuring. They're selling off divisions to pay settlements, focusing solely on their generic medications going forward. No more Meridian Pharmaceuticals." "Will the company survive in any form?" I asked. "As a much smaller entity, maybe," James replied. "But the Meridian we knew is gone." We sat in silence, watching the sunset. 20 years of my life had been dedicated to building something that no longer existed. Yet I felt no regret. "What now?" James asked eventually. I smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. "Now we move forward. I've been contacted by a patient advocacy group. They want help reforming pharmaceutical industry oversight. And there's a biotech startup looking for someone with my experience to help build ethical corporate governance from the ground up." "Both sound perfect for you," James said, squeezing my hand. My phone buzzed with a text. "Lisa, my former assistant, just saw the news about Neuroxolin. Did you know about this all along? Is this why you did what you did?" I typed back, "Yes. I'm sorry about your job, but I couldn't let it continue." Her response came quickly. "I understand now. My aunt was on that drug. Thank you for exposing the truth." A weight lifted from my shoulders. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. Perhaps that was enough. One more text came through from an unknown number. "You won. I hope it was worth it." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Marcus Reynolds would spend years, possibly decades, fighting criminal charges and civil lawsuits. His legacy was destroyed. His freedom likely forfeit. Justice had been served. As darkness fell, I leaned against James, feeling peaceful for the first time in months. "They never saw it coming," I murmured. "What's that?" James asked. "Nothing," I smiled. "Just thinking that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates." He kissed my forehead. Remind me never to get on your bad side." I laughed, a sound of genuine relief and release. The past was settled. The future, uncertain but full of possibilities, awaited. And I was ready.